Welcome back. The point of view tonight is having an exit interview with the outgoing U.S. ambassador to Ghana. 40 years working in the public service, serving the U.S. government. Half of that in Africa. 3 of those 20 here in Accra, Ghana as ambassador. And she has graciously said she will speak on the point of view before she leaves to reflect on her work. Let's take you back to her first day in office. The team put together, her team this time, put together a short video of her first day in office. Enjoy.
Ghanafo, mi chiamo. I'm Virginia Palmer. I'm the newly arrived United States ambassador in Ghana. I'm so excited to be here. My husband Ismail Asmal and I are happy to be returning to Africa. We've lived in Zimbabwe, Kenya, South Africa, and most recently Malawi, where I had the honor of serving as U.S. ambassador. I love the work I do, so I always jump immediately into talking about policy. But I should pause for a second and tell you a little bit about myself. I love to travel and meet new people and try different cuisines. I already love Keliwele and know that Ghanaian jollof is the best and much better than Nigeria's. I love wildlife and the outdoors, so I'm anxious to get to Mole and Bia National Parks. Indeed, I want to explore all of Ghana's national parks. Ismail and I are avid art and handicraft buyers, and I'm a little craftsy myself. I enjoy painting and have started making quilts out of the beautiful fabrics I've bought in Africa. Ismail and I are incredibly proud of our daughters, Aaliyah and Nadia, and our son-in-law, Paul. They're not accompanying us this time around, but will be frequent visitors to Ghana. I've reflected a lot on what it means to serve in Ghana. Ghana played an important role in the history and development of the United States, as the large Ghanaian diaspora in the United States attest. Many have answered the call of Ghana's year of return, and in addition to many visitors from the United States, there are 45,000 Americans in Ghana today. I'm moved by the fact that at the time of Ghana's independence, Ghana was a beacon not just for other African countries striving to throw off the yoke of colonial rule, but also for American civil rights activists struggling for justice and equality at home. That struggle continues today because democracy is hard work. With our shared democratic values, I know that Ghana too is working to perfect its democracy. The embassy will support that work with programs to protect human rights and strengthen civil society, to uphold accountable governance and show how democracy can deliver what citizens want effectively and equitably. I'm also excited to deepen our trade and investment relations and increase our $2.7 billion in two-way trade. I look forward to continuing our work to support entrepreneurs, empower women and young people, because anything done to empower women is good for everything else, and spur inclusive economic growth. I'm also looking forward to getting to know Ghana, to buying some kente and fugu dresses, and learning some of the Ghanaian languages, and seeing more of your beautiful country. Most of all, though, I look forward to meeting you. See you soon. Oye wadon. Medasi. Thank you.
Wow, so that was 3 years ago. It was like you were launching a manifesto. Looking back on that, would you say you've been able to do, how well do you think you've done, having seen this 3 years after?
Oh, gee, there's still work to be done to deepen the relationship. Yeah. But I do think the relationship is thriving. Yeah. And I'm pleased to have been here for Ghana's elections and my own, and to see the power of democracy and see the power of democracy in the region, and also to see Ghana remain a beacon for the region and an example of democracy, which I think is incredibly important.
Possibly the only example.
Well, not the only one, but certainly the strongest one.
West Africa has changed because I take you back again. The first time I visited Kenya in 2011, I was surprised that I had to be scanned for everything to enter a hotel, to enter a university. They are very security conscious because the area is considered a higher risk. It seems to me as if because of what's happening in the Sahel, West Africa is generally becoming, it's not what it used to be 30 years ago. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is indeed the epicenter of terrorist violence globally. There are more attacks in Burkina Faso than anywhere else in the world. And Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are all facing terrible security problems because of a common enemy, and that enemy is common to the United States and Ghana as well. I think Ghana has been a beacon of stability for a number of reasons. Democracy, number one. People feel like they can affect the change they need to affect. The second is the government of Ghana's commitment to inclusive economic growth and social cohesion. So the government of Ghana is paying attention to make sure that social services are delivered in the north, which is poorer than the south generally, and that vulnerable populations on the border or vulnerable ethnicities like the Fulbe receive social services to which they're entitled. And the third is that you are an exporter of security. You play an outsized role in cooperating with your neighbors and sharing intelligence to defeat a common enemy, but also in supporting UN peacekeeping, for example, and that makes you more stable.
Why do you think the Sahel, and in particular those three countries, have become so, because some people feel like the vacuum left after the Libya episode could have been part, because there's a lot of weapons coming in from Mali. And of course, a lot of the citizens are frustrated with France, and that also so I just don't know why has the Sahel become so dangerous?
I mean, that's a very complex question, and I think all of those factors apply. But I think the solution to that, the solution to a security problem, is not less democracy; it's more democracy, because that democracy and that confidence that you can affect change through the ballot box rather than through a gun is very important to stability. The other factor in Ghana, which I think is important, is Ghana's tolerance, your religious tolerance and your inter-ethnic harmony. And those are things that I deeply admire. And I think to help the Central Sahel, I've been intrigued by President Mahama's approach of saying, let's talk about what we need to do to make ourselves more secure and more safe and to improve and deepen the relationship, and then we'll talk about democracy.
But is democracy necessarily the answer, though? And don't misconstrue this. I love the democracy Ghana has, but you quoted Franklin on 24th, was it 4th July 2004, when you said that a republic, if you can keep it, because you said that keeping a republic is harder than establishing a republic. So that suggests that if the democracy does not deliver the goods, people can get frustrated. So, and that's part one. And point two, should we say democracy is the answer? Isn't it good governance is the answer?
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
But I think you get the best governance with democracy. I believe that, because you can hope that an undemocratic ruler will be benevolent, but you can't guarantee that. And the democratic checks and balances put them on notice that I can remove you if you don't deliver for me. So I think the best way to get delivery of good governance is democracy. I think what's implied in your question, and I will own, is that if we preach democracy, we have to hold our partners accountable for good governance. We can't tolerate a friend who's been in office for 40 years. We have to also say, hey, you need to be more democratic. You need to be more responsive to the demands of your people. And in that little clip you played of me 3 years ago, I talked about equitable and inclusive governance, which is the good governance that you're talking about.
But in the kind of world we are in, where it's almost very bilateral, in the sense that in the past there were coalitions of countries working to solve problems. It doesn't appear to us as though the current administration is as interested in that. So, for example, if you look at, and we are not discussing Europe, right? But if you look at what happened with NATO and President Trump's views around, look, we can't keep paying for your wars, so everybody has to contribute. So it appears everybody's on their own. That's the impression we get from the administration's stance. And yet a complex problem like Sahel requires collaborative resolution. How do you reconcile that?
I would rephrase or restate that. It's not that we don't value international institutions and organizations. It's that we don't want the United States to bear all the cost of them, that the benefits of those accrue to many countries, and countries like our NATO partners should pay the share that they've committed to pay. And President Trump in his first term put NATO allies on notice about that, and they have been responding. But that doesn't mean that we don't value international organizations.
But does he believe in multilateralism?
Well, I think multilateralism has its role.
Because if you, I mean, for example, the United Nations and all these, I mean, look, this is 2025, right? 80 years since the UN was started. So for me, a 40-something year old, the world as I know it was framed after the World War II, right? And that world, we decided to come together to solve problems collectively. Now, the rhetoric of the US president does not seem to necessarily believe in that. And also the position of the US as the so-called leader of the free world. That seems, we don't know if he even wants to own that space anymore.
Well, I think the United States and the world have benefited from that post-war era or post-war order of which you speak. And we continue to do so. I think the world has changed since then. There are partners who are much more prosperous than they were in 1945 or 1950, and who can bear a greater share of some of these organizations. And I think that's what President Trump is evaluating.
Does the increased relationship African countries have with China worry you personally or the administration? Because there's this chart that we were shown where like 20 years ago, the US was our #1 trade partner for the whole of most of West Africa. Now most of us are doing more business with China. And that seems to be something your president harps on a lot. And the Chinese are also very active in Ghana. We do a lot of business with China. We have a very strong relationship with them coming in to sell goods here and that type of thing. How does that change the equation of the Ghana-US relationship?
You know, I'm very confident in the American brand. I think if the playing field is level, American innovation and creativity and the way we operate free from corruption is to the advantage of countries where we invest and trade. And I think we should help countries ensure that the playing field is level so that there's not a race to the bottom, so that whatever foreign company is coming in isn't exploiting your labor or polluting your environment or operating illegally in your gold mines. When that happens, American companies will prosper and the relationship will prosper. I think American companies need to show up for that to be true. So I encourage them not to be too risk averse in places like Africa, because there's certainly money to be made and those relationships will be mutually beneficial.
Let's talk about the energy sector. I think the past 7 or 8 years, the upstream of the petroleum has been very quiet. Although I think one of the lead companies there is Cosmos, which is American. We're told by President Mahama that some activity would resume with some drilling. What's your overall analysis of Ghana's oil sector and its potential for transformation?
Actually, you summed it up very well. 10 years ago, huge potential. And in fact, the Minister of Energy and I were discussing this last night. At one stage, you were producing 195,000 barrels, and now it's down to like 135,000. And there's been no developmental drilling in the last 7 years. So that sector isn't growing, and that's because of some things that inhibited investment or were a disincentive to investment in the sector in the last 7 years. And so President Mahama and Minister Jinapur are looking hard at that and looking to see how they can incentivize new investment. So indeed, Cosmos is interested, and there's some American other big oil companies also looking. So I think there's a lot of potential in that sector.
The compact was big when President Kufuor started with the first one, and the second one on energy, very promising. We know the reason why it was discontinued. But when you were appointed, some of my media friends said, because of your background in the energy sector, we should be hopeful that you could put in a word for, if not a renewal of the council compact, certainly some conversation around the power sector because of its transformative nature. What can you tell us, General, about the possibility of any serious support in the power sector, even if not in the form of a compact? Because we see the challenges ECG is facing, and we hear what the government is trying to do. What can you tell me about the power sector?
Two questions there. I'll start with the compact, and then I'll go to ECG, and please remind me if I lose my thought. On the Millennium Challenge Compact, I told President Akufo-Addo when I presented my credentials, when my letter from President Biden, that I would work with him to see if we could get another compact, because there were some missteps on the second compact, and we had to cancel $190-some million of the second compact, to the great my personal disappointment and also the disappointment of the Millennium Challenge Compact. And President Mahama, who was there for the beginning of that compact, told me when he was still a candidate that was one of his priorities. So he and I had common cause on that. And indeed, while he was still a candidate, he went and had meetings at the Millennium Challenge Compact, which I was very happy about, and I did too. Right now, we don't know what form the Millennium Challenge Compact will take. Okay. So I remain committed to helping Ghana if new compacts become available, with helping Ghana become eligible. The two factors that are essential to eligibility are passing a scorecard, so it's governing well on behalf of your people, which Ghana does, and also maintaining a certain score on anti-corruption, which Ghana does, and it's important to keep that up. And then also to demonstrating that the last compact was successful. And a key element of the last compact was the financial viability of the ECG. Because ECG is bleeding your exchequer. And it's bleeding your exchequer more than we thought. I used the factor $1.4 billion a year. When the Minister of Finance spoke to the National Economic Dialogue, he said $2.2 billion a year, which is essentially effectively the scale of your IMF program. So those losses, either at the electricity pole or in the counting rooms, are enormous. And I was very pleased to see President Mahama announce a panel to evaluate ECG and what reforms are necessary. And I'm looking forward to seeing the results of that.
A reform of ECG would put Ghana in a good place to benefit if there were to be any kind of power compact. It's almost like a precondition, right?
I think reform of ECG is going to be good for the Ghanaian economy, full stop. You need to do it because it'll be good for the Ghanaian economy, not just as an incentive.
No, because the minister talks about we need investment, and he's been talking about needing investment in the distribution chain, and the compact does provide money. So, and because you said that the preconditions may include the success of the previous compact, of which the ECG performance was one. Right. So that if we got ECG working better, it puts the country in a better position to benefit from more support on the power side.
It puts the country in a position to benefit from whatever assistance is available, but also from more foreign investment, all kinds of things. I mean, you face doomsor without sort of getting the power sector in workable condition. So it's essential. Another element of that, if I may speak frankly,
yes, please,
is that our independent power producers are owed hundreds of millions of US dollars. And we gotta be frank that investors in that sector don't invest without calling the companies that are on the ground already and saying, what's it like to invest in Ghana? Should I invest in Ghana or should I invest somewhere else? And they're going to say, Ghana's fabulous, Ghana's stable, it's democratic, the people are warm, their population is well educated,
they don't
but I'm not getting paid. And the bottom line is getting paid, and getting paid on time is probably factor number one of the ones I listed.
We'll come back and wrap up with the question most of you want me to ask, visas, and the whole issue around Ghanaians working and living in the US. We'll deal with those when we come back. Stay with us.